to begin the Tractate Gittin. Today we're going to study Le'ilui Nishmat in memory of my father, my teacher, Harav Chaim Naftali ben Harav Yaakov Yitzchak Hareini Kaparat Mishkavo. Some introduction. Tractate Gittin, obviously dealing with the law of divorce. The Torah tells us in the book of Dvarim, Deuteronomy chapter 24, and I quote, when a man takes a wife and marries her, and it comes to pass, if she finds no favor in his eyes, because he has found some unseemly matter in her, and he writes her a scroll of severance, Sefer Kritut, and gives it in her hand, and sent her out of his house. Here we have two avenues between the Rambam and Tosfot Yom Tov in regards to this tractate. The Rambam hold that this tractate should take place right after the tractate Ktubot. It's because it go in a subsequent order. In his view, the bill of divorce, the get, has to come right after the matter of Ktubah. If there's an issue, then he should write the bill of divorce, Tosfot Yom Tov, and that's the way we have it. It's follow the tractate Nedarim Nazir Sota, and then you have Gittin and Kiddushin. There are those who have Gittin after Kiddushin, but we go by the Tosfot Yom Tov. The idea of get, the word get, the meaning of get, which is the bill of divorce by Jewish law, obviously is different. There are different type of Gittin. We have a regular matter of divorce. We have a get mekushar, the special get that's written for the Kohen, which is a little longer process in a sense that hopefully he changed his mind. In Judaism we try to have shalom bayit, the peace in the world, peace in the home, as much as we can. However, there are some cases that we say that it's a mitzvah. It's a commandment to get divorced. Can be all kind of circumstance. The word get, we have two avenues for understanding the word get. Rashi right away said to us that the get, in a sense, it's the expressions of the divorce, but Tosfot elaborates in few points. Rashi is later on speak about it, but Tosfot here said that get, either you go by the one avenue, which is the gematria, the numerical value of the word get. Gimel is 3, tet is 9. You combine the two, it's 12. And why it's 12? So Tosfot tells us that even other matter of shtarot, other matter of documentation is also called get, but since it's common, it's vernacular and is common in the language of people to use for the bill of divorce, we use the word get. He brings also another interpretation by the late Rabbeinu Saadia Gaon, the great Gaonic rabbi. We discussed his book Emunot V'Deot many times. So Rabbeinu Saadia Gaon said that if you look at the Torah, we have the 5 books of Moses, the Pentateuch, but the 5th one, as we all know, it's Mishneh Torah, is a repetition. If you look at the Torah, it's always 4 lines, 4 empty lines by the end of each scroll, of each book of the Torah. Now, the beginning you have 3, so you have 3 times 4, it's 12. So it's the idea is that the separation between each book of the Torah, its implication to number 12, which is the same as the word get. Reb Chaim Kanievsky, the great Torah scholar and rabbi, I have the privilege to know him in person. He said that if you look at the letter beyachad, meaning being together in Hebrew, so you have the letter bet and dalet, and you have yud and chet, meaning the letters in between is the get. That's the space between beyachad, meaning together, versus divorce. The Shiltei HaGiborim said that it's the special animal somehow in the South America that it's called gata, and that animal is basically cannot stand any other animal. They stay away from other animals. The Vilna Gaon said something fascinating, that only a giant Vilna Gaon, that way before the computer era, he said that if you look at the entire Torah text, you'd never see the word Gimel, the letter Gimel and the letter Tet in Ivrit together in the Torah. They never combine as two. So the idea of kritut, the idea of separation, is the entity of get, meaning total cut, total separation. The Khatam Sofer explained to us why we start the Tractate Gittin with something sad. Usually the treatment the rabbis have, you see it in the Haftarot, you see it in the Torah reading. We always try to have something nice at the beginning, something nice at the end, something that encourages us. Why they start with statement, Hamevi get mimdinat hayam, one who bring a bill of divorce from a husband to his wife from a country overseas, meaning something outside of Eretz Israel. So he said, the reality is when it's come to divorce, as we said earlier, we try to have shalom bayit, we try to have peace in the house as much as we can. However, there are circumstances that it's impossible. If there are thousands and thousands of miles between a husband and wife, and this goes on for a long period of time, it doesn't make any sense to keep a framework of marriage in that way. So sometimes it's proper to pursue, as we said many times, we have 613 commandments Torah. About 270, the rabbi said, applies somehow in our days, since we do not have at this point the Beit HaMikdash. Many of us are not living physically in Eretz Israel. So the reality is that we have about 270 commandments that applies to our days. One of them is the idea of divorce, meaning we not initiate that, but if it come to a term and conditions, we have to sometimes to encourage that, which is the first case. So again, Mitzvah Hashem, we start page 2 in Tractate Gittin. Here we talk about the emissary. It's called the Shaliach. The Shaliach, in a way, is one of the witnesses. As you know, that always when it's come to witnesses, it's a framework, we always ask for 2 kosher witnesses to be part of that. However, when it's come to Isurin, when it's come to a general matter, soon you see examples, Ed Echad, 1 witness in some cases is sufficient. I give you a small, just day-by-day example. You walk in your home, your wife serving you, guest, whatever it is, with meat product, right? You're not going to tell her, okay, I don't know where you bought it. I didn't see the stamp of the bag, the package. I don't know if you bought it, it's a kosher or not kosher, if you bake it properly or cook it properly, right? Because you cannot live life like that, right? So you have to have a build of trust of one person. In our discussion is Ed Echad, one single person. When it's come to Isu and Eter, when it's come to prohibition, allowance, there are some cases that you go by one person. Here we have a situation that, especially if there's a friction or they're living far away, that the husband appointed a person to give his wife the bill of divorce. However, there is a concept that is called befanai nichtav ubefanai nechtam, meaning the ed, the witness, need to say clearly, lucidly, I was witness when they sign that document. Why? Because the husband can come from far away, and as Tosfot explained to us, and he can say, oh, wait a second, this is not a valid a get. Why? Because I wasn't there, this is a fake get, etc., etc. So, Hamevi get mimdinat hayam, as Tosfot said, mimdinat hayam, it means not outside of Israel. It means that it's far away, excluding Bavel, everything is far away. So it means that western part of Eretz Israel, that it's the great sea, the great Mediterranean Sea. Tzarich shiomar, he is required to state the following formula, that he hands over the get, the bill of divorce, and he said, Befanai nechtav, was written in my presence, Ubefanai nechtam, and it was signed in my presence. So is no doubt. Now we have different avenues. Rabban Gamliel Omer, Afe mevi min harekem u'min hacheger. When we have the framework of Eretz Israel, there are certain areas that it's outside of that border. So for example, Rashi explained and others said that it's a Kfar Ludim, which is a place that it's outside, it looks like outside. Tosfot explained that it's not part of Lod, it's outside. So the moment you have that, you may think that it's a different border. Think for example those who remember Germany, in those years that you have Eastern and Western Germany. So what happened is that sometimes soon you see examples of conflict between the two and different authorities, and one not allowed to cross the others. So in short, here we have example of something that it appears outside, but again you have to go in that sense. So you have to say בפני נחתם. רבי אליעזר אומר אפילו מכפר לודים, as we said ללוד, והחכמים אומרים אינו צריך שיאמר בפני נחתם ובפני נחתם, אלא מביא והמוליך. So you see here several avenues. You have Tanakama that said that he needs to say it. You have Rabban Gamliel that says even Rekem and Cheger. You have Rabbi Eliezer said that even Kfar Ludim. And you have the sages that said you don't need to say this statement. It's enough only if you have someone who carried the get from far away, cross the Mediterranean. He bringing the get from Tunisia, from England, from far away, and someone who carries the get from Eretz Israel to United States or to Russia, right? So anytime you go far away, you cross the Mediterranean Sea in that sense, then you need to have this declaration. If someone carries from one location within the reign of another reign, so within the overseas countries, is also required to say this statement. My presence is signed, written, my presence is signed. Rabban Shimon Gamliel אומר, אפילו מהגמוניה להגמוניה, even from hegemonia, meaning even you have a district to another district, the same country. As we said, as example, I use the East and Western Germany as an example, but can be in those days it was a king of Yehuda, he's a king of Israel, you read it in the book of Kings, so you cannot cross from one district to another district. There's a lot of regulations, sometimes you have a wall in between, you have rules, so therefore he needs to say, since you have a borderlines, he needs to say clearly, as we said, the Mishnah referring Rashi said only in the south and north, because the western part of Eretz Israel is the water. Rabbi Yehuda אומר מרקם למזרח ורקם כמזרח. Rabbi Yehuda said from Rekem up to the eastern part, the Rekem eastward is considered a be part of the overseas country. ורקם כמזרח מאשקלון לדרום, ואשקלון כדרום. אשקלון, as you know, is a city in southward, and for that sake it's considering outside of Eretz Israel. Even if you read the book of Yoshua chapter 13, it is part of Israel. But Tosfot explain when they return from Babylonian exile, originally when it's come by the people who left Egypt, it was part of Eretz Israel. Unfortunately, after it was the destruction of the first temple and the Jewish people went to Babylon, so when they returned from Babylon, that was not part of Eretz Israel. So therefore, if someone, Tosfot explained, bringing the get from that location, he needs to say, from Ashkelon, he needs to say, at the front of my presence it was written, and at front of my present it was signed. Me'ako latzafon ve'ako katzafon. So here Tosfot have a disputation between Rabbeinu Tam and Ri. According to Rashi, as we said, Rekem, it's eastern, it's not part of Eretz Israel. But Tosfot said, Rabbeinu Tam hold when they return from Babylon, so it's the people is sanctified, and it's part of Eretz Israel. And any place that did not conquered is not sanctified. So it means all these places, Rekem, Heger, Ashkelon, it's not occupied, it's not conquered by the people of the Babylon, people who returned from Babylon. So therefore, you treated in that sense, according to Rabbi Yehuda, half of that is outside of Eretz Israel. According to Ri, he says that it's all relate to the central piece of Eretz Israel. Any place that is a distance, it's outside. So, for example, you have the yeshiva institution, you have a betei din. So that's when it's come to Gittin, it's considered, take it as outside because it's the distance from a centerpiece of inhabitants. And the way that Rashi expressed it is appear more follow the view of Rabbeinu Tam. Rabbi Meir Omer Akko ke'Eretz Israel leGittin. Rabbi Meir said you treated the city of Akko and Eretz Israel with regard to halachot of divorce. And you see here some Mefarshim that said that Akko in those days divided even as a small city. Some say that it's part, some said it's not, some said it's divided to some part and some not. Amevi get be'eretz Israel. If someone brings a bill of divorce from one place to another within Eretz Israel, because in Eretz Israel it wasn't the decree of the sages that the emissary needs to declare that he brings the get. Ve'im yesh alav orerim. However, it have sometimes a situation that there are those who contested, which means if the husband objects by saying that the bill of divorce is forgery. So therefore, yitkayem bechotmav, you can ratify it through the signatories, which means the rabbinic court must authenticate the signatures of the witnesses in order to ratify the document. So obviously, part of the get soon you see is the idea of lishma, that they have to be for the sake of writing the get. The Ktsot HaChoshen elaborates and he said, the way to do it right, you juxtapose, which is you take the Shtar, the document that was already written in the past by the Bet Din, meaning you have these two signatories, and you compare the signature on the get to the signature that these people have in the past over documentation that the Bet Din have in their archives. And since you juxtapose the signatures in those days before computers era, right? So therefore, you can approve the get that is valid get. So now the Gemara elaborates on this rabbinic decree that if someone, emissary, the agent, bringing a get from overseas, he needs to say that in front of my present it was written and in my present it was signed. My Tama, what's the rationale that the sages put that decree? So here is a different view. The first one, Rabbah Amar, Rabbah says, page 2, Pi lefi she'ein beki'im lishma. Because the people who live overseas are not expert in writing the get, the bill of divorce, for her sake. This is a very important concept in Judaism. The Torah tells us, good morning, in the book of Deuteronomy chapter 24, that he should write for her the bill of divorce, the book that, they call it Sefer Kritur, the book that separate them. So one of the idea is to make it lucidly, clearly, that that's for her, for that person. So it means if the get was written not for that purpose, is invalid. The people who live overseas, who are not as erudite as the people in Eretz Israel who are people of Torah lives, they do not know the rabbi's view on that. So therefore the sages instituted that the shaliach, the emissary, must say, in my present it was written, in my present it was signed. So Tosfot asked a question. If people who live in overseas are not learned as the people in Eretz Israel, so they're not familiar with all the law of the Gittin, of all the law of divorce. So why we mention only invalidity of get that was written not for the purpose of lishma, for this specific woman, wife, her name, and so, we can concern of all different invalidity of gets. So they said, the truth is they know some of the rules of Gittin, but as far as the lishma, for the sake of that specific person, they disputed of the sages' views, and they have to say that you cannot derive from the text that it has to be that way. Meaning, if you go by the dry text of the Torah, you just say that you take the get and you give it to her, period. The sages came in and says, can be several names, can be a misconstruing, can be all kind of twisting in between. Soon you see many examples that the husband does that for all kind of reasons. The Pnei Yoshua elaborate beautifully on this Tosfot. The Pnei Yoshua said, the concept of lishma, for the sake, it's not enough to think machshava, that you think for that sake. When you're writing Sefer Torah, when you're writing Tefillin, when you're writing Mezuzah, when you do all this holy work, okay, it's not enough that you said, I'm thinking to write it for the sake of writing Sefer Torah. You have to express in words that this is lishma, this is for the sake of writing this scroll, this tefillin or this Sefer Torah. So therefore, the witness, edut, has to be bepeh maleh, in a very clear expression. In my presence it was written, in my presence it was signed. That's the way the emissary can come up and validate the get. That's the first view of Rabbah. Rabbah said again that people who live overseas are not experts in writing a get for her sake. So therefore it's not sufficient for a get to be written in a technically correct manner. It has to be written for the sake of the men and the women who are divorcing. Second view is Rava. Remember, here is Rava and Rabbah. Rabbah is in English with B, Rava is with V. Okay? Rava Amar, the reason the sages instituted that the emissary needs to say, in my presence was written, in my presence it was signed, lefi she'en edim metzuyin lekaimo, because there are no witnesses available to ratify it. Meaning, since the witnesses are living, for example, in England, okay, the place that they signed the bill of divorce, they signed the get. And in those days, it wasn't a big journeys, horses, wagons, boats, etc., that cross that long distance. You cannot find people in Eretz Israel, or at least not easily find Eretz Israel, that recognize the signature of those witnesses. And because here's the problem: you have this get, you free her, and the husband will come back and he says, it's all fake. I never involved with this. I don't know what you're talking about. And you cannot find people who recognize those signatures and vouch for those signatures that they are valid signatures. So therefore, you cannot fulfill the original documentation by those signatories. So the sages put the special decree that the shaliach, the emissary, must declare, in my presence was written, in my presence it was signed, and therefore he basically he make the get valid, and by testifying that that's not a fake, it's a real signatures. If the husband come back and said, it's all fake, he will not be trust to invalidate the get, that it's already fulfilled by that shaliach. Now, later we explain why we take one person a testimony as a valid testimony instead of regular way, Rashi said, of two. My benayu. So now the question is, since we have two avenues, one is Rabbah and one is Rava, what's the real difference between these two avenues? The aituye beitre. You have here a situation that you have two. There are two people brought the get. So the husband sent both of them to divorce his wife. According to Rabbah, they need to say, in my presence it was signed, in my presence was written and signed, because we are concerned that it might be not for her sake, lishma. Okay, so therefore is no difference between one or two witnesses. According to Rava, you do not need to make this statement. Why? Because according to Rava, it's enough that there are two. So if the husband come back and challenge that validity, both of them are here and they can testify for those signatories, and therefore they will overrule and rejected the objections of the husband later on. Iname, another difference, באותה מדינה, iname, ממדינה למדינה בארץ ישראל. As we explained yesterday and today, we have here even within the states, if you remember when we talk about the civil war, etc., you have different states. It was time in a history that different states not allow one to cross the other. Or sometimes you have a journeys that within the country that one place not get along with the other for all kind of reasons. So for example, when you transfer from the Yehuda to Galilee, I used example earlier that Germany, if you remember Germany, it was eastern and western part. One is the communists and one is the others, and they not allow, you remember that era? Not allow people to cross that wall, right, within the state. So lehavdil here, Rabbah said that you do not need to say, in my present was written, in my present was signed, because the get, the divorce was sent from Eretz Israel, and the people of Eretz Israel are very familiar, erudite, that the get needs to be written for the sake of the name of that specific woman that get divorced. So therefore you have no concern that maybe that get was written not for her sake, and the whole challenge of the husband come back and say that it's fake is not relevant, versus Rava, that he is concerned that maybe the husband come back and say that this get is not valid, that is fakes, and you do not have witnesses that recognize the signatories, and therefore you have a concern that since you don't have those transportation between one place to another, therefore you require the emissary to say clearly, in my present was written, in my present was signed. Another difference between Rabbi and Rava, iname, באותה מדינה במדינת הים. If he brings from one city to another the same state, as we said earlier, people who live overseas are not so familiar. People, they are familiar, and someone who transfer from that place, so it's a problem. Rava said that speaking in the same state, so since you talk about different cities but the same state, if the husband come and challenge, it's easily to find the witnesses that recognize those signatories, so you do not have to have this statement, in my present was written, my present was signed. So now the Gemara start challenging Rabbah. ולרבה דאמר לפי שאין בקיאים לשמה. According to the view of Rabbah, who said that the reason because they are not expert in writing a get, for her sake, liba'ei trei, let us require two witnesses to testify about it. מדדהה והכל עדויות שבתורה, because the Torah requires, for example, if it's a mandatory disputation, we need to have two witnesses in order to rules. Because when you're asking me to give you, for example, $1,000 that you claim that you lend me, and is no documentation, you have the burden of proof to bring two witnesses that testify that I borrow from you the money. So when it's come to money, or it's come to a forbid capital punishment, you have to have the two witnesses that prove it. Now, Tosfot explain, is chashash rachok, it's very far to think that the husband will find invalid witnesses. But here you said, Ed echad ne'eman be'isurin. As we explained, that you walk in the house, you remember that example? and your wife, for example, serving meat. So you're not going to say, oh, wait a second, how do you know that you bought this meat in a kosher place? How do I know that you cook it in the way that halakha requires? You cannot live a normal life with distrust. So therefore we have the assumption when it's come to isur and heter, in this type of situation, that even you have one witness, you trusting her notion that it was bought in a kosher place, that she cooked it properly, etc., etc. That's the concept. The same applies to people who claim that they tightening things or slaughter things or other things that relate to the kosher produce. Otherwise, a person can never eat by his fellow, and a person cannot even eat by the food that the husband and wife give to each other without two witnesses that come in and prove each and every act. And since you cannot live a life like that, so therefore we have the rules that ed echad, that in that sense one witness is deemed credible with regard to a prohibition. Now, you should know the Tosfot disputed and said that it's not always. For example, in the law of Nida, etc., it's not always like that. But as far as the Shaliach here, he is trustworthy to say that she is allowed now to marry anyone else. And the Shev Shma'ateta explained to us that whole idea of married woman applies only when there's no witnesses. The moment witnesses come in and prove it, you do not have to go by the two. It's sufficient to go by one. Eimur de amrinan, because we follow the notion ed echad ne'eman beyisurin, that you have one witness that they deem credible when it's come to a prohibition. Kegon, here is an example. Chaticha safek shel chelev. We are prohibited by Torah law to eat fat. So if you have a piece of fat and is uncertain if it is forbidden fat and uncertain if it's permitted, so you have here isur ve'heter, chatichat safek shel chelev, safek shel shuman. So you're not sure which way. The Torah said in the book of Vayikra, chapter 7, verse 22, that any manner of fat of animal is prohibited for us to eat. So it means that those, for example, fat that of offering that slaughter on the altar, the rest of the fat of animal you can eat. That's the general term of quote unquote fat. They said the lo itchezak isura, that because when it's come to this situation, the piece can be rendered permitted by a single witness, as there is no presumption that is forbidden. So when you have a case of uncertainty and one witness said that it is permitted fat, we take him is deemed credible. Avalacha, but here you allow her as a married woman to go out and marry whoever she wished to. The itchazak isura de eshet ish. Here you talk about something much serious, which is the forbidden relation with a married woman, a status she retains until it is established that she has received a get. So therefore you have a total different situation. Have a davar shebe'erva. It's matter that it's under the something that is forbidden, the sexual relations that can be attested by davar shebe'erva, anything that is related to that matter, you cannot go pachot mishnaim, cannot attest it by fewer than two witnesses. So here we are back to square one. The question is, why it's enough for this emissary, to this agent, to come and allow her to marry, why we do not need to have two witnesses that testify that this get, that this bill of divorce was written for her name. So the Beit HaLevi elaborates on that and said that they have to have two conditions. one is something that is forbidden, דבר שבערווה, and number two, התחזק איסורה. So that is the forbidden is clearly, the Chavad Da'at elaborates and said, if you have a witness that come and give an edut and a witness, and he said that this bill of divorce was written lishma, for her name's sake. So therefore, that's his witnesses of what? He witnesses of the documentation. He says this documentation was written for her name. So he basically validates the paper, but is nothing to do with the relations, davar shebe'erva, that's something that you have to have two witnesses. It's total different litigation, it's total different category. And the Gemara goes another avenue and said, Rov bki'inen. The assumption is that most of the Jewish people are expert in the requirement that a get must be written for the women's sake. ואפילו לרבי מאיר דחייש למיעוטה, even Rabbi Meir that is concerned about those who are the fewer, that are not familiar, we're still not concerned about get that comes from overseas that maybe was not written for her name's sake. Why? Stam safra de dayane migmar gmire. As you know, when it's come to the quorum of Beddin, so we have an uneven court, right? You have three rabbis, right? Three experts. And you have uneven, so you have the Av Beddin, the head of the rabbinic court, the third, that he overruled either way, for one party or another. Okay? Now, you have a fellow that is called a safra, a scribe, that he's basically, in our simple language, the fellow that takes the minutes, and the fellow that writes the get, and have all the technical part of the signatory, etc. Sometimes even to this very day is the students of the high degree of rabbinic school, like people who wants to run for judges, etc. So that's called Safra de Dayane, the fellow who does that. So he basically, for our case, he writes the get, the bill of divorce for the husband. So even those who live outside of the Eretz Israel, they know the rules that he has to be written for the sake of this specific woman in a very clear description that he is about to get divorced. The Maharsham have a big discussion of what do you mean by saying Rov Israel Beki'in, that most of the people are familiar. What exactly you meant by saying all familiar? The reality of that. But anyway, V'Rabbanan hu de'itz tarich. And the sages is the sages who require testimony about this matter as an extra precaution. And he said, "V'Rabbanan this tarich v'hacha." And here, in regard to emissary that bring in the get from Medinat Hayam, from place far away. Page 3, Mishum Iguna. Iguna, Aguna, in the book of Ruth, the first chapter, verse 13, is the idea that she's deserted. Why is the wife deserted? Because she's married and she's not. Why is that? Because here is the husband, he cannot find two trustworthy emissary to go and carry the get to his wife, and therefore he is not sending her the get. So, and she cannot get married, she cannot open a new chapter, she cannot do anything, she's stuck. And therefore, she will not be able to marry anyone and stuck. Tosfot elaborates, and Tosfot said, the reason that you have to have in that structure that the husband needs to write is because he can play a trick. For example, he can write on the divorce that he's a Kohen, and he's not. And then he comes back and he said, oh, it's a fake. Look, I'm not a Kohen. Or he add the name. He write a name, instead of calling him Raphael, he call himself Eddie Michael Raphael. Whatever, right? So a term is that he changed his name in the ketubah. So therefore, he comes back and he said it's fake. So Tosfot said, anyway, Akilu barabanan. So therefore the sages are lenient with her by saying that the agent who brought the bill of divorce is deemed credible despite the fact that he is a single witness. So the Gemara challenged that and said, Hai kulahu. This is a leniency that the sage says. Chumrao is a stringency. The imatzrachat leitrei, if you require to have two witnesses that say that the get was written for the sake of divorcing her, lo atei bal me'arei ufasilei. The husband cannot come back and say that it is not valid. Chaid atei bal me'arei ufasilei. So the husband can come and contest and invalidate the document. Kevan de Amar Mar, since we're going to study Mitzvah Shem on page 5, Bifnei Kamanot Nola, at the front of how many witnesses, the emissary needs to give it to her and said, at the front of my present was written and signed, Rabbi Yochanan ve'Rabbi Chanina is disputation, Chad Amar Bifnei Shnaim, one said that you have to have two witnesses, and Chad Amar Bifnei Shlosha, and one said that you have to have three witnesses, and we're going to discuss it on page 5. So they said, Mi'ikara meidak dayek. So at the outset, the agent is careful to clarify the matter fully. Velo ate le'oru nafshe, he will not act to his own determined by bringing an invalid get. So you have here a discussion among the Rishonim and Tosfot. If the husband not returned, he left to overseas and is not coming back. So the sages said that they're lenient. It says one witness is enough to say that it's over, right? So why you don't look at this situation and say that you should make it in a lenient way? So Rabbi Akiva said Isha daika minasva. Women will not get remarried just by statement. The nature of women is to make sure that they have all the papers properly before they make a new commitment to a new husband. The nature that the rabbis come to conclusion in sense of unity is a normal state of mind woman when she is about to marry a new man is only when she is 100% sure that the past relationship is over. So therefore here the rabbis are more lenient. She here cannot assure herself. The shaliach, the emissary, said that he sent this get. The husband come and said it's not true. So you don't take him under consideration. The Baal not ne'eman, and if you have one witness that said it was written lishma, is sufficient.